For 14 years of marriage, my wife had one rule. Every year, on October 18th, she disappeared. Exactly 24 hours. Not 23. Not 25. 24. She would kiss me goodbye. Turn off her phone. Leave her heavy platinum wedding ring right in the center of the kitchen counter beside the coffee maker. And vanish. The next morning, precisely at 7 a.m., she'd come home. Take a long, steaming shower to wash away the scent of distant highways. Put her ring back on. And continue life as though nothing had happened, brewing her chamomile tea, asking about my upcoming software sprints, smiling through breakfast. I asked her dozens of times where she went, searching her face for any flicker of deceit. She always smiled, kissed my cheek, and gave the exact same answer, her voice dropping an octave. If you ever find out, you'll stop loving me. I thought she was joking. A dark, running inside joke between a husband and wife who liked dramatic flair. 14 years later, I discovered she wasn't. The first few years, I respected her privacy, trusting that whatever sorrow she carried was hers alone to bear. By year 5, curiosity started eating at me. I found myself checking her car's odometer on the night of the 17th, and again on the morning of the 19th. Calculating the mileage, exactly 312 miles round trip. Every single year. Down to the 10th of a mile. By year 10, I was convinced she was having an affair. Every October 18th, my mind poisoned itself with images of another man, another family, another secret life running parallel to mine in some anonymous suburb. I imagined a domestic life that looked cleaner, happier, better than mine. Then, on our 14th year, something shifted. The morning of October 18th arrived with a biting, frost-heavy wind. She looked at me before leaving, her eyes heavy with a profound, crushing sorrow that didn't match her usual practiced calm. She didn't just kiss me goodbye, she broke down completely, sobbing into my shoulder, hugging me tighter than she ever had before. Her fingers digging so hard into my back they left bruises through my shirt. She whispered, her breath hot against my neck. If I don't come back this year, don't look for me. Then she turned and walked away without looking back. That single sentence haunted me for 12 agonizing months, replaying in my mind like a warning siren while I stared at ceilings at 3 a.m. The following October, when she placed her ring on the kitchen counter and walked out the door, I didn't wait. I followed her. She drove for 3 hours. Never speeding. Never breaking a single traffic law. Never checking her rearview mirror. Almost like she'd memorized the route years ago. Running on the cold, unforgiving muscle memory of grief and routine. She checked into the Whispering Pines Motel, a tired, sun-bleached motor lodge off a forgotten stretch of interstate, surrounded by rusted-out pickup trucks and flickering neon vacancy signs. She didn't use a credit card. She paid in crisp, folded $20 bills pulled from a plain white envelope. And she didn't check in under her own name. I watched from behind the frosted glass of the motel office lobby as the clerk slid the registration card across the counter. I craned my neck, reading the signature upside down. Emily Carter. I'd never heard that name before in my life. It wasn't an old friend. It wasn't a maiden name. It was a ghost. I parked my sedan 2 rows down behind a delivery van, keeping my engine idling, sweating through my jacket in the stifling, stale air of the vehicle as the dashboard clock ticked past noon. An hour later, someone knocked on her door. Not a man in a tailored suit. A little girl, maybe 13 years old, wearing an oversized yellow windbreaker, and carrying a worn canvas school backpack covered in enamel pins. She didn't knock twice. She gave a specific rhythm: 2 quick taps, a pause, then 3 slow ones. The door opened instantly. The girl ran into the room and threw her arms around my wife, burying her face in Clara's coat, her shoulders shaking with quiet relief. Then she looked up and called her, "Mom." My world stopped. The breath caught in my throat, freezing right there in my chest, sharp as glass. 14 years of marriage. No children. No nursery down the hall. No boxes of baby clothes in the attic. No secret pregnancies or adoption papers. We had actively chosen a child-free life. Or so I had believed every single day since we exchanged vows. So, who was this child? And why had my wife kept her hidden in a flea bag motel 300 miles away? I crept across the crunching gravel, keeping low beneath the roofline until I reached room 14's side window. I pressed my palm against the cool glass, parting the heavy, faded polyester curtains just a fraction of an inch. Inside, the girl laughed. A bright, carefree, musical sound that felt entirely out of place in the grim, cigarette-stained walls of the motel room. She unzipped her backpack and pulled out a stack of charcoal sketches, holding them up proudly for my wife to inspect. Clara smiled, running her fingers over the paper with a tenderness I had never seen directed at me, not even on our wedding day. Then, the connecting bathroom door clicked open, and another woman entered, drying her hands on a small white hand towel. She stepped forward, kissed the girl's forehead, and then turned to embrace my wife. It wasn't a hurried embrace. It was the intimate, effortless hug of two people who shared a kitchen, a mortgage, a life. They looked like family. Not lovers. Not strangers. True, comfortable family. I felt physically sick. My stomach churned hot acid, rising bitter into the back of my throat. I had prepared myself for cheating. I had prepared myself for a secret double life with another man. A hidden family born of boredom or betrayal. Not whatever this suffocating web was. 3 hours later, the three of them left together, piling into a dented gray sedan. I stayed back, tailing them from 4 cars deep, praying my hands would stop trembling hard enough to keep a steady grip on the steering wheel. They drove out past the city limits, winding up the steep, twisting blacktop toward the municipal cemetery overlooking the valley. That's when everything changed. They parked near the wrought iron gates, walking solemnly between the rows of gray headstones. But they weren't walking toward a freshly dug plot with fresh flowers. They walked straight past the modern sections, heading deep into the old, forgotten corner of the graveyard near the back brick wall where the ivy choked the markers. They weren't visiting a grave to mourn a distant relative. They were visiting mine. I crept closer, hiding behind a massive, moss-covered marble mausoleum, my eyes scanning the stone inscription in the fading, amber afternoon light. There was a headstone. My name, Julian Vance. My photograph, a crisp, laser-etched portrait of my face staring back at me with unblinking stone eyes. My date of birth. And a date of death. Recorded 14 years, 2 months, and 3 days ago. Right next to it stood another grave, with my wife's photograph etched into the granite, bearing the exact same date of death. I stared at the stones, my mind violently rejecting what my optical nerves were sending to my brain. Mine. Hers. Both buried side by side beneath 2 tons of cold granite. 14 years ago, exactly 1 week before we supposedly met over spilled lattes in a crowded downtown coffee shop during a Tuesday morning rush. My legs gave out beneath me, the strength draining from my bones, and I dropped hard to my knees in the wet, decaying autumn grass. Nothing made sense. The mathematics of my own existence, the memories I built my life upon, had just collapsed into dust. Then, cutting through the heavy silence of the graveyard, I heard the little girl speak. "Do you think he'll ever remember Aunt Clara?" My wife started crying, her shoulders shaking violently as she clutched the cold edge of my gravestone. "I pray he never does, Maya," she choked out, her voice cracking with a sorrow so deep it felt structural. "I pray every single day that the wall holds." Remember what? Remember who? I had no idea. The dense fog in my brain grew thick and blinding, suffocating my thoughts like carbon monoxide. Until an old man stepped out from behind the towering oak tree, leaning heavily on an ebony wood walking cane. He walked straight toward me with slow, measured steps. He didn't look surprised to find a living man kneeling at his own tombstone. He didn't look frightened. He looked almost expecting me, as if he had been standing watch for years, waiting for the clock to run out. He stopped 2 feet away, looking down at me with tired, knowing eyes, adjusted the collar of his tweed coat, and said, "It took you 14 years, Julian. I honestly thought you'd crack by year 10. The old man introduced himself as Dr. Arthur Harrison, a retired chief neurologist from the State University Medical Center. He looked down at me as I struggled to catch my breath in the biting autumn air, my hands clawing blindly at the damp grass. He said he had been waiting for this day for over a decade, waiting for the micro fissures in my manufactured reality to finally widen enough for human curiosity to override my neurological programming. Then, He reached into his leather satchel and pulled out a thick, manila medical file bound with a heavy red elastic band. The name on the cover wasn't mine. It was a name I had never heard in my life. Stamped in bold crimson ink. Subject 04 Delta, deceased. Paperclipped to the inside was my exact photograph. But the details beneath it were entirely alien. A different birthday 28 years prior. A different birthplace in the Pacific Northwest. A different profession. A different blood type. A different medical history. Inside were dense neurological charts. EEG readouts. And court-sealed federal documents bearing federal judge signatures. One specific sentence was highlighted in screaming yellow marker. Patient requested complete identity replacement, personality retention, and targeted retrograde amnesia following the incident, waived all legal rights of reclamation. I looked up. My eyes locking onto my wife Clara, who was standing a few paces away. Tears streaming silently down her face. Her hands trembling as she held the little girl's shoulders. "You weren't born with a name, Julian," she whispered, her voice cracking into a dry rasp. I let out a harsh, broken laugh, shaking my head so violently my neck popped. "What is this? Is this some kind of sick psychological experiment? Am I in a coma? Am I insane?" She didn't back down. She kept talking, the words tumbling out of her like a dam finally breaking under pressure. 14 years ago, you weren't an ordinary software engineer living a quiet suburban life. You were a senior structural engineer working inside the Federal Intelligence Annex downtown. A coordinated truck bombing flattened the entire block. 37 people died instantly. The air rushed out of my lungs as if I'd been kicked in the ribs. Your fiancée at the time, Sarah, died in that blast. She continued, stepping closer, her boots crunching on the gravel. Your parents were killed in a simultaneous gas line explosion across town. Within 48 hours, everyone you loved was gone. You were the only one in your immediate circle to walk out of the rubble alive. Physically, you recovered with minor scars. But mentally, the survivor's guilt completely destroyed your mind. She knelt down in the wet grass beside me, ignoring the mud ruining her slacks, her eyes pleading for a shred of understanding. For nearly 2 years, you lived in the secure psychiatric wing of a federal hospital. You begged the doctors, the ethics boards, judges, anyone who would listen, to let you wipe your brain, to let you die. When they refused euthanasia, you discovered a loophole, an experimental, classified neural suppression protocol designed for deep cover operatives suffering from terminal trauma. You signed court papers erasing your entire life. Every document, every photograph, every agonizing memory connected to Sarah, to your family, to that day. The world seemed to tilt violently on its axis. The trees spinning overhead. The government called it an experimental cognitive rehabilitation program. She whispered, a tear dropping onto my jacket sleeve. You called it the only way to stop the screaming in your head. I stared at her. The pieces of a puzzle I never knew I was playing violently snapping into place. But one final, jagged piece didn't fit. If we never met by accident, I stammered, my voice cracking into a dry wheeze. If you didn't just stumble into my life at that downtown coffee shop because you liked my jacket, who are you to me? Dr. Harrison stepped back, leaving just the two of us in the shadow of the headstone. Clara closed her eyes, taking a deep, shuddering breath before delivering the final blow that shattered what remained of my reality. I wasn't just a random bystander, Julian. I was the lead clinical neuropsychologist assigned to your permanent white protocol. I spent 2 agonizing years sitting across from you in a sterile white basement room at the facility, helping you rebuild your broken mind from a blank slate, teaching you how to read a clock again, how to hold a fork, how to laugh at a bad joke, how to exist in a world that no longer hurt. She swallowed hard, her voice dropping to a raw, broken whisper. Eventually, we fell in love during the process. But the federal oversight rules strictly forbade any personal relationship between a clinical handler and a patient under active cognitive reconstruction. If they found out you were developing feelings for your doctor, they would have reevaluated your stability, wiped your brain a second time, and sent you to a deep storage facility. She paused, wiping her face with the back of her sleeve. So I resigned my commission. I burned my credentials, changed my name, changed cities, and walked away from my entire career to start over with you in a quiet suburb, pretending to meet you like a normal woman in a coffee shop. She turned and pointed gently toward the little girl standing quietly by the ancient oak tree. Every October 18th, I return here to the cemetery to visit the daughter of your original fiancée, Sarah. The little girl who survived the exact same bombing because her mother shielded her with her body. The child you used to read bedtime stories to every night before the blast took everything from you. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird beating against glass. She isn't my daughter by blood, my wife whispered, reaching out to cup my trembling, ice-cold cheek with her warm hand. She was yours to protect. The little girl you promised your life to, before you voluntarily chose to forget she even existed so you could sleep at night. People think the biggest confession my wife ever made was that she had lied to me for 14 years about who I was, where I came from, and how we met. It wasn't. The biggest confession came after the silence settled heavily between the gravestones, broken only by the distant caw of crows in the gray canopy above. She looked me dead in the eyes, her expression stripped of all fear, carrying only the crushing, beautiful weight of a decade and a half of silent, sacrificial devotion. I would rather have you hate me for lying to your face every single day, than lose you to the memories I fought so hard to save you from. That was the exact moment I finally understood something terrifying, profound, and absolute. Sometimes, the biggest betrayal isn't telling a lie to protect your own skin. It's deciding that someone you love more than your own life can never survive the terrifying mercy of the truth.